Frodo Baggins. Shire. Foam. Hello friends, Bill here. I know, you thought I was a creepy Nazgûl, but it's just Bill under here, don't worry about it. It is my favorite time of year. It is time for the PropTarts Secret Santa. PropTarts, the most amazing group of makers on the internet. We'll have a link where you can go join them on Facebook. Normally every year they do a Secret Santa. Everyone comes together to both make, give, and receive prop gifts. And this year I got an assignment, and that giftie would like something from Lord of the Rings, specifically a Nazgul sword. Now I'm of course wearing my Nazgul outfit here. I've got a sword and the cloak that we made for a Halloween video a couple years ago. We did that on the cheap very quickly. There isn't a single stitch of thread in this outfit. It is all done with hot glue. And of course the gauntlets that I made with our buddy, Mr. Adam Savage over on Tested. Videos for all that stuff down below, including this sword, which is a Spirit Halloween purchase, and we did a little bit of an upgrade on it, but that's not the sword we're gonna be doing. No, we're doing the bigger, different version of the Nazgul sword. I'm gonna make it mostly out of wood. But first, I'm gonna take all this stuff off so I don't get it caught in any power tools. Like I said, I'm making this mostly out of wood. Not my first wood sword. This is the Lego sword that we made a few years ago. Mostly poplar wood. And then this is PVC pipes and some urethane plastic. The sword I'm making today is this guy here, this Nazgul sword. This is an image I found on an online auction website of a screen-used sword. This is the real deal. This is the one that Peter Lyon made. So I use that to make some patterns. These are just some 2D patterns that I drew up in Inkscape. There'll be a link down below where you can go download this. We have a bunch of other free patterns for you to go download, print out full scale. I've sort of removed the crossguard here. I'm going to make this from a different piece of wood. But the blade and the handle are all going to be made out of this 1/4 inch thick poplar. Quick note about wood. I'm using pre-cut lumber from the hardware store. This is poplar for the blade. I have a 1/4 inch thick stuff here. And it's convenient, fairly cheap. It's just a few bucks. But not all boards are created equal. They're not all straight. And for a long sword thing, you want to make sure it is. So this one, I wasn't checking at the store and I accidentally bought a pretty curved looking board there. And that just will not do. I don't want the end of my sword sort of hooking off to the left like that. So went back to the store, double checked, and got a board that is much straighter. In fact, I bought a couple of them so that I would have some options in case I goof up one of my cuts, which is very possible. I think this one's my favorite. So we'll get to cutting that one out. You know, a few years ago, we got to go visit Weta Workshop, and we had the opportunity to meet Peter Lyon, the sword maker who did pretty much all the swords for the Lord of the Rings movies. It was really kind of cool getting to meet him and talk to him about the swords he had made. At the time, I think he said like 18 years prior. And while we love Sting and Boromir's sword and all the really cool swords that they have, for him, it was his old art, and he was very humble about talking about his old art and how he's improved over the years. So.
And we got to hold Boromir's sword.
We did. It was very cool. I'm intentionally not cutting up this pattern because I want to keep it. Since I don't get to keep this sword, I want to have something left over. So I'm just going to fill in those gaps. And these lumps, whatever there are, I'll add those later. So I'm going to just trace the edge here. This pommel we'll add later as well. So that's kind of where that ends. To complete that, I grab my ruler here. Complete these lines here. There we go, that is our sword blade. Ha ha! Ha ha ha! Got the outer profile cut and sanded almost to the final shape and everything. Now I want to mark the top of the fuller here, this line right there. And to do that, I don't want to cut up my pattern. So I'm just cutting some notches I can use along the length of this to help me draw the whole line. There we go. And I have multiple spots, not just two. And then I can take my big ruler here. There we go. It is asymmetrical. It's supposed to be that way. Just saying that for my own sake. Okay. I'm also going to mark about halfway down the side here because we're going to remove the bevel between this line and that line. I did as much shaping of the fullers, the sort of diamondy looking cross section that'll go on this thing. I did as much as I was comfortable with on the belt sander. I'm afraid I would take too much off. Also, I can tell from my references that this has a hollow grind on it. It's got a concave shape to that cross section, kind of like that. I'm not going to do that because I've never done that before. And again, I'm afraid I'm going to take away too much material. So we're going to have straight grinds on this and a diamond shape, and I'm just doing the rest of it. It's going to be a bit of work, but doing the rest of it by hand with some Hunter grit. I have much more control with this than with that belt sander, and I don't want to have to do this all again. So for now, we sand. Don't waste time with dull sandpaper. As soon as it's clogged up, replace it. Oops. That is no good anymore. All that means is extra work for you. Try not to get my fingers in this bear trap. There we go. Back to work. As I'm sneaking up on the form that I want, I decided to try a card scraper. I actually bought these for working on a 3D print, but it turns out they're actually made for woodworking, which is perfect. I've seen my buddy Mark Spagnolo over at the Wood Whisperer use these, and many other woodworkers. I just like Mark a lot. And he's got a video on how to sharpen this and everything, so if you're interested in that, you should go check out his video. I'm just using it because I can get the angle I want nice and flat with this rigid edge here. That's something that this sandpaper can't do for me. And as I scrape away, I can get a pretty sharp peak on the top of this fuller here. It's taken a while, like I said, sneaking up on it, but I can look at the top edge there and get it to where I like it, and then look at the side edge here and get that to where I like it. And eventually I'm gonna have to put a secondary bevel on the side of that, so I wanna make sure there's enough meat left here. I don't wanna go too hog on it and remove too much. Go too hog, too ham, you know what I mean.
Does this sound better than scraping with a 3D print?
You tell me. Sounds fine from my angle, but you're listening to my microphone. I'm gonna draw the next bevel, this just line right here. I need a special tiny tool for the next operation. My mini block plane. Just a little extra sanding here to get those bevels nice and crisp. And I like how that's looking. Very happy with that. Next thing I want to do before we start like sealing and finishing this, we want to add some dings, some little bit of weathering that are on the original that I want to transfer over. And I think I'll just go in with like a rotary tool and sort of chew those up a little bit. I want this to end up looking really smooth, and right now it's got wood grain and everything, and I can sand it, and I will sand it really, really smooth. But to help it get smoother, we're going to use some sanding sealer. We'll do a bunch of priming after that too, but this stuff's designed to help wood become more smooth before sanding it. So we're going to brush a layer on here and let it dry. Not exactly sure what this stuff does, but woodworkers use it, and I'm working with wood, so I'm using it. Also, I bought this like 5 years ago, and it's still full, and I would love to actually use it. Hang that up and let it dry, and start working on the guard. For the guard here, I have a piece of 1/2 inch thick poplar, a little thicker than the blade. And I've traced it out minus the little spike things. We'll add those later. This needs to be rounded eventually once it's cut out, and it'll be easier to do that without these spike things. The wood grain is going in this direction, which is important because I don't want these to snap right off. So that should be all set. We can go cut this out. So I've laid out some lines here. I'm going to try and cut a slot for the blade, and then on the bottom I'll have to drill some holes. Let's do the slot first. Got a clamp. And I've got my bear saw here. This is a pull saw. It's really sharp, and it should be exactly what I need to carefully cut a slot. Oh yeah, there we go. Slow and steady. Got to be careful. This will want to snap because of the grain direction, so I'm just taking my time. Okay, good enough. I fully expect these to snap off at some point. That's okay. Now we drill. Fully expect this to just explode into many pieces. Slow and steady. Yeah, that was gonna happen. All right. You know what? I'm gonna just... Oh wait, no, it's exactly... It worked! I thought this was the side part. That was exactly what I was hoping would happen. I did not have a lot of confidence in myself.
Have more confidence in yourself.
These might still break, but we're doing great. Cool, I have to clear out a little more. Nope, yeah, that did it. That did it, that's fine. I think, you know what I'm gonna do? Here's the thing. These parts here, I was gonna sculpt a little bit of epoxy clay on them anyway. I'm just gonna take them off and then sculpt the whole thing out of epoxy clay. That seems like a lot less fiddling at this stage. So that's gonna come off. This can come off way too easily. I'll drill the holes, put it on there, and once it's glued, we'll re-sculpt these parts. That seems like a better plan anyway. Now I can be a lot more aggressive without fear of snapping those things off. Got this tiny little saw blade here that I'll be able to use to do the last little bit of cutting here. There we go. A little sanding in there, a little filing. We should be able to slide that onto the blade. Everything is sanding. Everything. All right, do a quick test fit. It's not quite where it needs to be. This has to go. Just go cut that out, and then this should be able to slide all the way up where it needs to go. Yeah, that's more like it. Let's see, that matches up quite well. All right, now that that's mostly sorted, I can sculpt this a little bit. It needs to be more rounded. I'm gonna be doing quite a bit of sculpting and making a lot of dust. So I have this downdraft table. It's hooked up to a little shop back here to hopefully pull all that dust away from my face, collect it so it doesn't get over all my stuff. Doing a little bit of sanding here, well, sculpting, but like I said, everything is sanding. And then it's cool that this is lumpy because the final one is a little lumpy. So I'm not trying to make it perfectly smooth or anything. I want it to be a little hand-hewn. Okay, all right. I think this can get hit with a little bit of that sanding sealer. At the rate we're going, the blade will be ready for sanding right when I finish painting this.
No rest for you.
It's just all sanding all day. But it's gonna look so good. So I have some 220, and I'm just sanding the sanding sealer down nice and smooth. I'm not looking to remove any wood, just going for surface finish. Feeling smooth, feeling good. The goal was to try and get rid of the wood grain look, but we're gonna go a whole step further. I wanna add some texture to this blade. I'm looking at the reference here and it looks like the blade's got some pitting on it. And my thought, this will probably work, is to put some Mod Podge on there. So I'll cover the whole thing in Mod Podge. And then I'm gonna let it dry a tiny bit. And while it's kind of setting up, I'll stipple with this chip brush. I've done this before on projects to add texture to the surface and it works really great. Once it dries, probably tomorrow, I'm gonna sand the high spots flat. So we'll get some of the flat spots back, but there should leave some low spots that'll look like pitting. That's the goal anyway. If it all goes sideways, I can sand it all off and try again. But confidence is high. Try not to knock that off the table. Does it look good on the end there? I can't see from here.
That's great.
Got a little bit of texture on there. I like where it's going. I think I'm gonna do a second layer and then just let this whole thing dry overnight. Now we wait. It is a new day. The Mod Podge has dried and I went ahead and hit this with a red primer so that when we do the next step, we can see where we're taking off all the texture. And that's right, we're gonna do more sanding. So the idea is I'm gonna sand a bunch of spots back to smooth, but leave a bunch of other spots with that pitted texture on it. So it looks like it's been sitting wherever they keep their swords, wherever the Nazgûls keep their swords for centuries, getting corroded and pitted. Yeah, with that red primer on, you can already see the spots that are getting sanded and the spots that are not. And it's, I guess, just up to me to decide how pitted I want to keep it, because that's pretty cool looking. But I think I want to clean it up a little more, especially these bevels on the edge. I think those should be cleaned up a lot, almost back to smooth. And then the top of the fuller here, I think that could be a little bit smoother too. Yeah, that's what we're going for right there. Deeply pitted surface. I think that is the blade mostly sorted. It'll get primed again before we do our final paint. I think it's time to start turning our attention back to the guard a little bit and make the little shark fins that go on here. I'm gonna do a bit of epoxy sculpt over the whole thing, but first I wanna add some profiles. I can now go and cut out some little pieces like this that I can glue into the guard before sculpting. I'm gonna cut out my shark fins using some styrene here. This is thin enough It should work. But first, I'm going to sand both sides of it because I want to attach epoxy sculpt to it. And instead of trying to sand a tiny little thing like that, I can sand that surface now, and then it'll have some tooth for the epoxy clay. I added a little tab on the bottom so that it can go into a hole on that guard. So I can glue it in place. There. And they don't have to be perfect. This is thin enough you can just cut it with scissors. And I have enough material that if I goof it up, I can just make another one. This sheet of styrene I got from a plastic store, but you could also go buy like a for sale sign. At the hardware store, it's the same stuff. All styrene plastic. The thorns on the guard, I'm sure, are not identical. So it just has to get close. And we're going to sculpt over this anyway. This will just get us the profile. How good are these tiny scissors, by the way? These things are awesome. There we go. We can cut out a bunch more. Just a little bit of cleanup work here. You don't need to be perfect, but I do have standards. Figuring out the location for these thorns. And I'm looking at a reference picture I have over here because some are missing. I want to make sure that I match that as closely as I can. I'm going to drill a shallow hole here. That should do it. And then my little spikes can go in. There. We'll just super glue those in once I've drilled them all. Okay, the spikes face away from the center of the sword. I'm just repeating that to myself so I don't forget. A little glue, just using super glue. A little activator here. Whoop. Drip, drip. The epoxy sculpt will hold it in place permanently once it's all in there. This super glue should keep it while it's in the intervening time, I should say. A little more in there. It looks like the wood soaked that up. There we go, that's in there. Let's keep this crazy train rolling. I am quite pleased with my spiky, thorny shark fins, and I think it's time to attach this permanently to the rest of the sword, and then we'll do our sculpting with the epoxy sculpt. This goes on. I've labeled it, so I know that's the right way, and it's going to line up pretty much like that. And I've got some epoxy for the glue up, so we can get that ready to go. Got the good stuff. Is that just hair going to be just part of it forever? Nope, I got it. And this goes on. No take backsies. All right, now I can line it up with my pattern here, make sure everything is nice and level the way it ought to be. Looks good. Now we do the hardest part of all. We wait 5 to 10 minutes. Got some more of that 1/4 inch poplar here. And this is gonna be, I guess, the scales on the handle. It'll all be covered, but this is gonna make the handle thicker. And I've got 2 pieces that I pre-cut, and I'm gonna use some double-sided tape to stick them together so I can cut them out at the same time. There we go. That goes on, and then I'll use my pattern here to get this close. These are going to get sanded like a bunch, so it's not hypercritical that they're like perfect or anything, but you know. All right, I'm doing it without the bumps. We'll add the bumps later. I was gonna get cut out on the old bandsaw. I'd like to point out that my old bandsaw was manufactured the same year I was, 1982. Looks just like me too. There we go. We have two identical hunks of wood. These should go on here, kind of like that. And I think I could shorten them about 1/4 inch on this end. And then I'm gonna glue them down and round it. Just saying that out loud to see if it makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. This is more of that super fast instant set epoxy. Of course, you have to work really fast with this stuff. So you gotta be ready to do what you have to do. And clamp. Ha. Ha. Glue is mostly set. It's feeling pretty great too. Time to remove a lot of this material. I'm preparing my freeform sculpt, this epoxy dough, into a couple of batches, side A and side B. So I'm getting them all ready. It's kind of tough stuff to get out of the cup here, and I want to make sure I have as much time as possible with it while I'm sculpting. So getting everything done a little bit ahead of time. Because once you mix it together, the clock is ticking. The pot life, it says, is 1.5 hours, but stuff's kind of old. And while I know it will cure, because I used it a couple weeks ago, I'm not confident that I'm going to have a full 1.5 hours to work with it. It's also cold and not very malleable, so if we warm it up a little bit, that can help. And we want to make sure this stuff is thoroughly mixed together. Okay, gonna do the triangles here, and I have a plan. I think it's gonna be good. We'll see. Gonna, boy, that's sticky. That went sideways immediately. Let's get a little water on that. Gonna flatten this out and then cut out a little triangle and then place it so that I don't have to sculpt a triangle. Smooth it out a little bit. There we go.
Is it Sword Week on the Great British Baking Show?
Yeah. Hoping for no soggy bottoms on this one. Okay, let's see. Let's go lay that down. Oh, I kind of stretched it a bit, didn't I? That's okay. We can mash that down. Not bad. We got our tools here to coax it into place. Make sure it gets down and makes lots of contact with that surface so that it glues itself down. We don't want it popping off. It doesn't have to be perfect. I can refine this with sandpaper later, and I'm a lot better at sanding than I am at this kind of sculpting, so I'm just getting it close. But I am kind of trying to put some bevels in here. That is good enough for me. This is pretty good though. I am happy with my sculpt. It's a good bake. Pinch. This is great. Now I just use the styrene we put in there as a guide and support for the clay. Get my fingers wet so that it doesn't stick, and then we can just shape that. Oh yeah, that's actually a little quicker than I thought. I thought this was going to be a forever job. I think I'm at the point where the more poking I do, the more likely it is I'm going to goof it up. So we're going to call this good. I'll let it cure overnight, and then in the morning I can do all the final refinement with sandpaper. What do you think, Britt? How's my bake? A handshake? Oh my goodness, this means so much to me! Oh, sorry. Your hands are all sticky. Sticky hands Duran, that's what they call me. Let's go eat the rest of our burritos.
Burritos!
It is a new day and our epoxy clay is cured, which means I can continue sanding, of course, because everything is sanding. This doesn't have to be like perfect. And I've just got some 220 here. I'll do a little bit of cleanup. I want to make sure, especially where it blends into the wood, that there isn't any sort of seam there. It's meant to look like this is all one continuous piece. And especially around these guys, I want to make sure there isn't a seam on the bottom of the clay where it connects with the wood. I think this is pretty good for my 220 grit pass. Before I do any more sanding, I want to prime everything so I can get a better look at where we are. Got a screw eye here that'll make hanging this thing a lot easier. There we go, and now we can go prime it. All right, time to do the pommel. And I've started with a couple pieces of that 1/2-inch poplar. I just wood glued these together and let them dry overnight. And that's what I'm going to use as the stock for my pommel. Okay, let's go cut that out. That looks pretty great. I am pleased with that. Time to do the finishing work on this. I want to add some Mod Podge to this like I did the blade. I don't think the crossguard needs it, but I want to have just a little bit of texture on these flat surfaces. So, add a screw eye to this. Now I have a handle. We also have this hard coat Mod Podge that we found in there. Just giving that a try. I noticed when I was sanding the other Mod Podge that it was flexible and it was a little tricky to sand. So this might be a little easier. Just cover it, let it dry for a while, and then I'll go in and stipple it with texture. You do have to let it dry though, because if I stipple it now, that texture there will self-level a little bit. And if you wait for it to get kind of tacky, that's when you can really add that texture to it. Just do a couple layers like this. I am very happy with how that turned out. I think I'm going to let that Mod Podge dry a little bit before I sand it and prime it. Let's set that aside. Now, a little more sanding on the guard here. I can still see some of the wood grain. I'm pretty happy with it though. I think I'll just sand and prime that one more time and then the whole thing will be ready for paint. And someday I'll be done with sanding. Someday. Mostly just making sure the wood grain isn't showing and that the transition between the clay and the wood is also not showing. Back to the pommel here, just sanding the Mod Podge down a bit. So that should be nice and smooth, except for all the texture that I want to keep. Now, I think the last bit of priming. I'll prime this and we'll prime that crossguard and then we can paint it. Primer is mostly dry. Before we paint this thing, I want to add ribs, I guess, to make those part of the handle there. I'm going to wrap this in something, but we'll put wire down. I'm thinking this aluminum wire here will work great. I just want to line up where those are going to go. These are all the same size except for this big fella in the middle. So this is aluminum armature wire. It's pretty soft, which makes it really easy to like wrap around the thing like this. And I'm trying to get it to conform to the surface as tightly as possible. Give myself a little extra room there. I can slide off. Best way to cut this nice and flush is with a saw. So I have this little hobby saw here. And we want to have a nice square edge, which is why I'm not using like nippers. I could use the bandsaw too. I'll probably end up using a bandsaw. It's a lot quicker. There we go. And that can close right up and it should fit right on our handle there. There we go. That's actually a little big. I can trim a little bit more off, make it more snug. But that's what we're going for. Got this to fit nicely and I'm happy with that. I'm going to tack it in place with a little super glue. This is all going to get covered in vinyl, a faux leather vinyl that'll hold it in place. But I want to make sure these don't move before then. So I'm just doing a little light gluing. And that's it. I just have to make a bunch more of those. Just overlapping on the other side there. Just sanding the ends here to get a little bit of a tighter fit around the thing. It's hard to judge how much the blade of the bandsaw is going to remove the kerf there, so fitting it isn't exact. Hey, not bad. The ring in the middle here is thicker, and I have this thicker armature wire, but I want to remove a little bit of material. I think I'll go to the sander and just flatten one side of it a little bit so it's not quite as girthy. Also, it'll make it easier to bend. There we go. And around. Try not to knock anything off the walls of this ridiculous sword. All right. I'm going to go cut that. I can't get it off. We'll draw a line. And then I can bend it open again. This is like some weird puzzle. I don't really like those kind of puzzles. Be free. Okay, now we'll go cut it on the bandsaw. Keep that from moving. Give it a spritz. There we go. Time to paint. The base coat is just going to be a metallic paint, but going to be a little bit fancy. I've got some lacquers here. I've got this gloss black lacquer that'll go down on everything first. Then we've got our chrome paint. I've got Spaztics Mirror Chrome for this one. Then we're going to protect all that with the Alclad Aqua Gloss. This will all get weathered a ton, but I want to make sure that base coat of metallic looks really shiny and nice. To the airbrush. We let our airbrush paint dry overnight and it is so shiny. I really dig it, and the texture that we did with the Mod Podge came through. Looks awesome. But now it's time to really dirty this thing up. In fact, we're probably going to cover most of this chrome paint. And I got my acrylics here just for that purpose. Going to do this in a couple passes, so this is just the first choice of color. But I really want to dirty it up, and of course black is a good choice there. I don't want it to be totally black. I don't know that it's ever going to be just one color, so I have a little brown, and then I want to mix some gold in because I want a little bit of metallic shine, but I want it to be a little warmer. So we're going with gold. We'll just mix all this together, and then little water. Not too thin. We're not doing like a wash here. I do want some body to that paint. I want it to really stick.
That's an old sponge.
It's seen some stuff. Just coaxing it back to life. You could do it, little buddy. Cool. This leaves some really fun texture. I'm just gonna dab it on here. Just trying to avoid anything that looks intentional. But I'm doing that very intentionally. Okay, we're going to hit this with the hairdryer very briefly. And we're going to take a cloth here and knock it off the high spots. I could have even left that, hairdried that a little longer, I think. That's why I'm doing this on this small piece that's easy to repaint. That's kind of a test. But that's what we're doing. That's what we want right there. I clear coated the silver paint there. That gives me a little bit of protection so I can buff the edges. Eventually you will buff through that, but the clear coat's helping us out. The beveled edge there will be almost completely clean, I think, and all shiny. And I'm trying to go in different directions too if I'm going to leave streaks or anything. I don't want them to all be in the same direction. I want the top of the geometry there to be really nice and showing through like that. Yeah. Just want it, there's this like sweet spot, there's a little too soon. A sweet spot where the paint just starts to set up enough where you can kind of scratch it away. It doesn't quite, yeah, that's what we're going for. So enough of it sticks around that it leaves some texture behind, which is pretty cool. It's a small window. That's why I'm working in small sections here, because you got to be able to wipe it off. Once it starts to dry too much, then you got to wet it down again to get it to back to that state. But that's kind of what I want right there. And the other side, far too clean. The thorns here are getting the same treatment. I'm brushing it on because it's just easier to get more paint on that way. And then I can come in with my sponge and add some texture. I don't want to see any more of those brush strokes. That's really what I'm going for here. Oh, it's looking so cool. Got some raw sienna here, just a little bit. I'm going to add a tiny bit of rust, not a lot. The sword doesn't look rusty, particularly rusty in the reference picture, but I want a little bit more color in there. Just a few spots. And like before, I'm going to take most of this off and probably not have any on the edges there. There we go. And there's just like a hint of orange in there. And I think I'm going to do one more pass over all of this, like a black. Again, this is selective. I'm just picking and choosing where I want it to look a little darker in a very intentional random pattern. Very happy with this paint job. Letting that dry a bit, and we're going to wrap the handle. So I've got some vinyl here. It's like faux leather vinyl, and it's a two-way stretch. It stretches in this direction, does not stretch in that direction. And we're thinking this way makes sense so it can make it over all those rings. Oh, come on. That should fit all the way down, and then I can cut it to, I'll cut it a little long. And we have plenty more of this stuff if we have to try again. Doing a layer of contact cement on here. I'm going to do the same on the back of the fabric. I'm going to cover the back of this in contact cement, but I'm also covering this one edge here so that when it folds over, it'll stick down. All right, let's stick it. Here we go. All right, let's just press everything down. So this isn't going great. I think I should have brushed 2 layers of glue on the back of this fabric. I think it soaked it all up. and there's all this puckering. So I'm actually going to cut it with the stretch going this way and see if that makes a difference. Also, I hope this comes off. Yeah, it'll come off. You can see I've nailed my cloth down so that it can't get away from me and curl while I brush on. And this is my second coat of glue here. The first coat got completely soaked into the fabric. Don't fold over on yourself. That looks pretty cool. Didn't quite get that all the way up there. Pretty happy with how this all turned out. I'm just covering my sort of misalignment up here with a little strip, hiding my crimes, so to speak. That should all just sort of tuck down in there. I still want to do another wash of like brown paint over the handle here, but first let's get this pommel attached. We can lose these guys. And I've got this all thread here. I'm just going to cut a chunk of that. But first let's drill a hole for it. And I don't need a ton of thread in there. Got some mini bolt cutters here to trim off as much as I need. There we go. And I should just be able to thread that in there. And this should be able to go right in here. That looks pretty cool. Might want to do, you know what, we'll do another strip of that fabric around the bottom here. All tidy like there. There we go. Now that I know that it'll look good, I'm just going to put some glue in there so that it won't come out. This is a pretty loose thread. I like it. One more quick pass of weathering on that way too clean handle. This is really fantastic. I love it. It's hard to believe that it's actually wood. It's ridiculously light. It's still kind of flexible, but rigid enough that the blade is believable. And I'm pretty happy with how how the paint job turned out. Of course, we have to wrap this up, mail this off to our PropTarts Secret Santa. If you want to do the Secret Santa with them next year, be sure to join the PropTarts group. There'll be a link down in the description. Thanks so much for hanging out with me in the shop today. I hope you had a lot of fun with this build, as fun as I did anyway. And also, by the way, if you catch this video on the day it goes live, we have a holiday sale going. A bunch of discounts on our Foamsmith books, knives, 3D print files, all that sort of stuff. Link down below. Or just go to punishprops.com/shop. Thank you so much to the Extra Credit Club. They are the lifeblood of this channel. It is their financial support that keeps us going. If you want to join, there'll be a link down below. You get access to hundreds of previous exclusive videos, including weekly vlogs and little projects from here around the shop. Thank you again. Oh, remember, there's a link to all our blueprints, including the blueprint for this down below. Free of charge if you want to go build this yourself. If you do, send me a picture. I'm Chinbeard on Instagram and Twitter. I'd love to see it. All right, that'll wrap it up. And of course, I have to go wrap this up. So we'll see you next time. Happy crafting. Hey, Pointy. This one's for Frodo. Eight more and I'll have the whole set. As I'm sort of sneaking up on this form that I want to get, I've decided, let's do that again. Just a little pickle juice left from lunch. As I'm sneaking up on the form that I want, I decided to give a card scraper a try one more time. This drill bit f***ing sucks. Stop sliding. Now this side wants to slide down. What the? Maybe I just hold it. Hello, my name is Bill and I'm a human clamp. It's a thinly veiled excuse for me to put my Ghostbusters costume on again. Get it off, get it off, get it off, get it off. No! This is my life now.
Womp womp.
Oh.
Hi.
The Nazgûl. Wait. Oh gosh! Oh, the power went out.